Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations.
Widespread outrage and violence sweeping across Indonesia.
The idea is we need balanced and fair trade.
Infrastructure is probably the most rewarding and the most useful, but also could be the most challenging.
has clearly accelerated that growth for data center space, and powers have moved from megawatts to gigawatts.
Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Haslinda Armin.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. We know that we had a late night last night, but to have everyone here this morning, we appreciate that. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Bloomberg Business Summit at Asean. All the global players are here. And as we speak, President Donald Trump is actually on Air Force One en route to Tokyo. Things, as you know, have moved fast, and they'll keep moving fast. Here on the stage, we'll be talking about what else? Trade. But we're also talking about other things. We're talking about AI, whether or not we're in a bubble. We're also speaking about policies. We'll be quizzing central bankers about the outlook for the rest of the year and the years ahead. There's so much uncertainty. And if you want to stay abreast and continue to engage with us, please do connect on our event app. You can see that on the screen. That's the QR code. You can also find it at the back of your badges. And without further ado, first of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors. I'd like to thank our founding sponsor, Malaysia's Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, as well as our presenting sponsor, CIMB. Thank you too to our supporting sponsors, YTL and Zetrix AI. Well, that's it from me, short and sharp. Let the show begin.
Please welcome to the stage James Hairston, Head of International Policy and Partnerships Asia, Africa and Latin America at OpenAI. Eunice Huang, Head of AI and Emerging Tech Policy APAC at Google. And Annabelle Lee, Director, Strategic Policy Engagements and Campaigns, APJ and ASEAN, AWS, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Olivia Poe.
Hi everyone, thank you all for joining us today. I see it's quite a packed room, and I assume AI is on everyone's minds today, and for good reason. It's dominating the global tech narrative. AI isn't new, but it's now everywhere. From classrooms to call centers, governments to global supply chains, it's reshaping how everyone in this region works and competes. But I think the big question that we want to unpack here today is that where is AI really delivering results and making real impact? So I'm so honored to introduce my three panelists here. We have James from OpenAI, Eunice from Google, and Annabelle from Amazon Web Services. Three people who sit at the heart of this AI conversation. Thank you all for joining us. Now, I'd like to start a little bit broader, and I think, James, let's begin with you. I think you've mentioned you're bullish on ASEAN for ASEAN. That's a big statement, so we can dive into it here a little bit. Three things. What does that mean for you? What do you see? How do you see that play out in this region? And thirdly, also, does OpenAI make money in ASEAN?
Yeah, ASEAN is such a dynamic region, and as we think about what it takes as we sort of sit on the precipice of what we like to call the intelligence age. What's really going to drive, I think, a lot of economic activity, productivity, just new advancements in the ways that we think and see the world are countries and regions that have chips, energy, data, talent. And you can think of those inputs as just a key part of the compute infrastructure of the future and the productivity infrastructure of the future. And I think here in ASEAN, you have so much of that dynamic talent and populations energy resources. And so many of the conversations that have been going on this week, I think, really are an entry point to really propelling the individual countries and the regional economy forward. And it's great to sort of see and hear about all of the collaboration that is going to happen in sort of advancing that vision. So the region is extremely well poised, I think, to really be a driver of what's next in the intelligence age.
That's so exciting to hear. And Annabelle, I'd like to jump to you next. AWS works with thousands and thousands of enterprise customers, right? Which markets in this region or even in APAC are successful or challenging for you? You know, what works, what doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And look, I think ASEAN is still the fastest growing region for us globally in terms of cloud adoption and cloud adoption growth. And if I just think about the AI opportunity in ASEAN, by 2030, ASEAN is poised to be able to grow about $1 trillion in its economy from effective adoption and deployment of AI services across this entire region. I think it's with that in view that AWS has made some significant investments over the last few years across Southeast Asia, at least $12 billion already to date. And in the last, I would say, 3 years, we've made additional region infrastructure investments. These are our flagship infrastructure investments in 3 additional countries in ASEAN after our first investment in Singapore. And each of these investments are commitments between $5 to $6 billion. So that's just cloud infrastructure. And I mean, from our perspective, cloud infrastructure is the enabling infrastructure for AI. I mean, I know there are a lot of governments across the region thinking about what their AI strategy should be. You've heard some probably talk about sovereign AI stacks and putting hundreds of millions of dollars into these stacks. But for the vast majority of companies, cloud infrastructure and the scale that cloud infrastructure is able to offer, that's the way in which you build your AI stack, you build your AI applications. We offer language models everywhere. So we're very, very excited about the opportunity. And I think it's very, very nascent, I think, right now. Governments across this region, and I say that across APJ, are thinking about how to dance, I feel, with AI, both from an actual adoption perspective, but also from a regulation perspective. And so when I think about regulation, I sometimes worry about the pace at which governments try to put out and implement regulation. Responsible AI and the use of AI responsibly is critical to every economy to build trust with the population. But I would always caution a little bit of wait and see and think about high-risk applications and focusing on those first rather than doing anything too broad. And so I think we see 2 countries across APJ moving fast on AI regulation. The first is Korea. The second is Vietnam. Vietnam is currently debating a law. And I think we've provided this advice to these 2 countries as well. Be very clear about what you're trying to achieve from AI regulation. Start in a focused way rather than overbroad, and remember to focus on encouraging innovation as much as kind of thinking about regulating. So, and they're listening. So I think we're very, very excited about APJ as a region, and I think the overall the sentiment towards technology adoption, the excitement about it, it's something that we see quite distinct from some other regions in the world as well. So we're very, very excited about the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I mean, 2 big pillars, right? Having investing into the infrastructure which democratizes this technology, as well as shaping policy and regulation with governments to make it safe for all. Eunice, I'd like to jump to you. Google works very, very closely with governments on AI policy across APAC. What are some best practices you're seeing, and what are some maybe pitfalls governments should avoid?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think in Asia, my job, I sit in a role where I have colleagues from all over the world looking at AI regulation and policy across the world. And often I say that actually my job is great because many of the governments in this region are very inherently pro-innovation. They understand intuitively the opportunity of AI. They know that this is going to be transformative. They know that if they harness it well, it's going to help them, sort of leapfrog, help the economies move on and grow and develop. So the AI policy landscape in Asia, I would say, is generally quite positive, pro-innovation. However, like as Annabelle said, I think countries are also starting to see, okay, what can I do to protect my citizens, right, while enabling this opportunity? And so for this, we see governments slowly coming into, the phase where they think about how to regulate and how best to regulate. So the advice that we always give to them is actually, it's not true that AI is not regulated. If you think about it, AI is already regulated under existing laws in many areas. If a chatbot spits out your personal information, many countries have privacy laws that can already be utilized to act against this, right? The same for consumer protection laws, the same for cybersecurity laws. So start from your baseline of laws, see where the gaps are, see where you need to add additional clarity or guidance, and then do that top up, right? So that's one. The second, as Annabelle raised, is also we take a risk-based approach towards AI regulation, right? Not all AI applications have the same level of risk, right? Chatbot that really does scheduling really is very, very different from an AI application that diagnoses cancer, right? So you really should be focusing on the highest risk applications and seeing where the controls should be, what the transparency mechanism should be, what the compliance mechanism should be on that. And then also the last thing is really a balanced and aligned framework where you balance between the risk and the opportunity, right? So if you regulate too tightly, you're going to forego a lot of the very beneficial applications of AI. But then if you are too loose, then you don't tackle some of the potential risks. And then lastly, it's about international interoperability, which is really, really important, right? Where there are international standards, ISO standards, for example, lean on them. Where there are regional standards like ASEAN has developed, the ASEAN Guide on AI governance and ethics, look to that as a baseline for your economy and then see how you want to go from there.
Right, thank you. Annabelle, I'd like to jump to you for a little moment, because I think we've talked about agnostic regulation before, whereby different technologies, it's good to apply consistent principles across technology to regulate it, which is a little bit different from what Eunice just mentioned, right? Looking at high risk versus low risk tech. Well, what are your thoughts about this? How do you compare and contrast, or just group it together?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I don't see these two as actually like sort of opposite. In fact, I do think they are one and the same. As a, and I used to be a government regulator as well, writing policy. And as a policymaker, one of the most critical things you're thinking about when you're drafting policy is ensuring that your policy is going to apply in a consistent principle, regardless of what technology era you are. So I used to work in a telco regulator, and as we were thinking about policies around telcos, we wanted to make sure that it didn't matter whether it was like 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G technology, where we are today, that whatever we wrote down was still going to be a consistent set of principles. You might have to update your interpretations because of that new technology, but it's consistent principles. And I think it is the same here. I think risk-based regulation is something that is a principle that many governments think about when they are putting out regulation. Regulation ultimately exists for policy motive and being very clear on what those policy objectives are, and then working backwards from that as you draft regulation to ensure that you're taking, I guess, an approach that minimizes the amount of intervention that you're making as a government. And that's important because every time you make a policy intervention, there will be knock-on impacts. Some you won't necessarily be able to anticipate, certainly in the future, but even sometimes in the present. So I see these as actually very, very consistent. And I see many governments in Southeast Asia actually fully understanding and aligning along those principles. We were very heartened to see the conclusion and the announcement of ASEAN's AI Safety Institute. I think that's a brilliant framework and approach to be able to address practical safety implications of AI. And that's part of a broader global conversation. And now the ASEAN countries have a formal platform in which to engage with other countries and make sure that they're also advocating a point of view that makes sense for Southeast Asia. And for many of the middle-income countries in Southeast Asia, I think it's so critical to have that voice. because obviously sometimes a lot of these conversations are being led by more advanced economies, which are in a different state, both with a regulation perspective, but also obviously in terms of economic growth and focus principles of their own population as well.
Yeah, it does seem like ASEAN is taking a very different approach in trying to come together and develop a more collaborative and cohesive framework towards AI. Something that has been also coming across my plate is this concept of sovereign AI, which I think, James, you've also talked about many times. OpenAI has been engaging regulators not only in Asia, but across the world, right? Everyone's super excited about the company. So how do you view this emerging concept of sovereign AI, having to juggle so many different, stakeholders and governments? What are the opportunities or risks, or just how do you navigate this space?
So we recently, announced our OpenAI for Countries program, I think, to get exactly at this question of, how do you begin to strike the types of partnerships, build the types of tooling, and really allow for countries to set their destiny in sort of a way that feels, custom and local. And so we've been in conversations all around the world. And I mentioned, the sort of chips, energy, data, talent, that construct with countries about what are the, homegrown resources, who are the domestic partners that need to come together in sort of building infrastructure. We have a bit of a saying, like, infrastructure is destiny. And it's important that, countries really develop that domestic capacity that they're sort of projecting forward, not just, sort of the short and the medium term, but looking out, where are these uses going? What are the domestic priorities in areas like health and education and disaster relief? And in bringing together, whether it's energy partners, data center providers, even just some of the leading electronics and other manufacturers. These are some of the conversations that we have, but we think countries, whether we're at the table or not, that these are really top priorities for setting the terms of debate. And it allows countries to really customize, whether on language or on advanced uses that are a real domestic superpower, to be able to carve out their own sort of industrial and national priorities. So we're excited to be in those conversations and help nations around the world advance their thinking on the types of AI that they want.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a philosophical way to put it also, like infrastructure is destiny. I think that it gives us a lot of food for thought. And actually, I'd like to also bring up the question of, the US-China kind of tension, given that we are at the ASEAN summit. Maybe Annabelle could take this question a little bit. How is AWS kind of navigating that space? It sits between US and China, and specifically in this region, are you seeing or are you cautious about Chinese firms, say, using AWS for AI-related work?
I mean, first of all, I think there's a full acknowledgement that AI is at the center of geopolitics. I think that's been, so much of the conversation that's been going on maybe for a couple of years now, because I think there's full recognition that this is the next stage of technology. Now, at AWS, we focus first and foremost on our customers. So these are the businesses that we service. And obviously, we will do whatever we need to comply with the laws that we are subject to, and that includes from the US government, but it also includes domestic governments all across the world. So whenever we serve our customers in any country in the world, it's very clear in our terms of service that if they're using our services in violation of a law, we have the right to stop offering them that service. And I think it's no different here. But beyond that, I think AI is a democratized opportunity for everyone. And as a key service provider, we make sure that we enable and provide that broad flexibility for our customers to be able to continue to access our services. That's our key priority, and that's something that we will always work towards, regardless of whether it's laws related to AI or laws related to data or laws related to other kinds of data flow issues as well. So it's a fairly consistent approach that we've taken. I did want to pick up a little bit on this concept of different and new models of AI infrastructure as well, and sovereignty that I think you mentioned, Olivia, and I know we've just discussed. And in particular, I think it's very, very important as think there's a lot of hype language around like AI sovereignty and AI digital infrastructure. I always say pair it back to what you're actually trying to achieve and what makes sense. And this conversation is not a new one. We've spent a lot of time with our customers talking about when does it make sense to leverage hyperscale cloud, and when does it continue to make sense for you to leverage some kind of on-premise or your own data center. So I think that concept probably does apply as well very much with AI. The key difference, of course, being that AI does require a lot of additional compute power, and depending on what you're trying to do, you may actually need a very, very significant scale, right? And I think, obviously, at the software layer, what OpenAI has done with large language models has been like huge leaps in terms of that efficiency. But still, at the end of the day, there are certain things, if you want to do it, that you do need that scale. And so I think understanding when you think about, say, let's say nation-state self-determination when it comes around to AI, what does that actually mean to you? What are the actual workloads that you're trying to build? What are your concerns? What are the scenarios you're worried about? And then thinking about resiliency very holistically and deciding where you would put your always finite budget to spend on AI and what model makes the most sense for you as a result of that. So we've argued for, and I stand by the fact that flexibility is the most important thing here. When you're putting out regulation, don't just marry yourself to one approach. Think about how you actually want many approaches in different situations.
Eunice, is that what you are advocating as well with Google? I mean, like flexibility or collaboration.
Yeah,
I'm sure they all come together.
Yes, they do. But maybe just a little bit about this whole sovereign AI debate. I think completely agree with Annabelle that it's a hype word, right? It's very expedient to use that word, but it really means different things to different people. And I think it's really helpful to double click on what exactly do you mean when you talk about sovereign AI. Are you pursuing sovereign AI because you feel that your local languages, your local cultures are not sufficiently reflected in the mostly sort of Western US company developed models? Do you feel that you need to have control over the full stack? And if you do, then there are trade-offs because it's very, very expensive to be able to do that and to localize everything on-prem. So the UK, for example, when they talk about sovereign AI, they talk about how they want to make the most of the AI opportunity for themselves. They talk about developing local talent. They talk about pursuing broad adoption of AI. When Singapore talks about developing their own Southeast Asian language model, it's really to solve for that piece that they don't feel that existing LLMs reflect sufficiently local nuances, right? In Indonesian or in Tetum, right? The newest member of ASEAN. So that's coming from different places. So I think we need to be very clear when we talk about concepts like AI sovereignty. What exactly are you trying to solve? And then what is the best way to solve that without putting down very, very blunt regulatory solutions?
If I could just add, I think what's so true about what you both said, and I think something that stands out in conversations that we have with governments, is really being clear about the types of trade-offs that you've just described, being specific about the types of use cases. And every country is going to make its own choices, about the infrastructure, about the rules of the road, about its societal norms and artificial intelligence. And that's, every country's right, and everyone should make those choices. But I think one of the things that we can sometimes do as companies, as policy teams, is really just be clear about some of the technical trade-offs, of sort of where different decisions, will make for, outcomes that may not or may be possible technically, economically, based on those. So I think keeping those trade-offs top of mind, it's important in the national debates that we have as we talk about sort of where we are going to anchor our different economies. I think that's a real key, and it should be grounded in the specifics, as both of you have teed up.
Right, so there's just like lots of things to consider, lots of trade-offs, lots of nuances. I think OpenAI has been quite vocal about, ensuring about how it's ensuring its models reflect local languages and cultures, right? You guys have talked a lot about it. How, maybe you could share a little bit about how are you ensuring these models reflect the diversity of, let's say, the ASEAN languages, cultures, or even just people?
Well, first, that really starts with just the tremendous growth that we've seen in ASEAN. So I think over the last year, we've seen a 3x growth in sort of the users on our tools. And once that begins to happen and developers are using our tools, you see amazing uses in government and by the commercial sector. That really ups our understanding of how our models are performing on languages. We spend a lot of time trying to get real-time feedback across ASEAN and around the world. Where are we coming short? And there are teams, both from our clients, from our free users, who are giving us feedback all the time of sort of where we're performing well and where we have a lot of work to do. And we get that in real time from our amazing partners and commercial clients. We have a partnership with Grab, that works on sort of accessibility and language understanding in their tools. And actually, I think just saw that here in Malaysia, a physician that was working with the Ministry of Health just actually published the first peer-reviewed paper, using ChatGPT 4.0. And so again, you're seeing these specialized uses here in the region. I think that's the starting point, is as you see the growth accelerate, as developers use our tools and give us real-time feedback, that we sort of continue to improve our models, and we get that real-time feedback and take it really seriously in how we improve both the performance for everyday users as well as for our sort of enterprise and commercial clients who are similarly, letting us know where are we doing well and where do we have work to do, and that's a really important part of our product cycle.
Yeah, these are such important, concepts and things to grasp. I mean, all of you are working very closely with governments and policymakers, everyone, all the stakeholders, right? I was just wondering, because everyone's a business after all, on the topic of monetization, where are we for AI? Where are we on that scale? Are we at the beginning stages, middle? How are you guys navigating this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a range, right? I think we have 800 million, users around the world, and 5 million paid businesses who are using our tools. And so I think you see individual users who are, getting hours back in their day. We have partnerships with governments around the world and, different NGOs that show just the number of hours that are saved. We have a partnership with the United States with the American Federation of Teachers to train hundreds of thousands of teachers over the next few years. And as we've done some of the economic study, of sort of how many, the amount of time that professionals are able to put back in to their core work by, say, automating some of the tasks that they do. I mean, that's a version of monetization. It doesn't, sort of always show up in sort of the national statistics, but we think that's a really important part. Creators who are speeding up the brainstorming process and the ability to prototype ideas, individual developers and entrepreneurs. And so you multiply that by all the sectors, and whether you look at sort of the paid customers that we have or just all of the users around the world, the majority of our users use the tool for free. And from what we hear from them, it's giving them time back, it's helping them do their jobs. Students and young people, I think here in ASEAN, our number one user group, sort of young people from like 18 to 24 who are studying and enhancing their work. And so you think about the productivity challenges that all of our economies are up against, and as we look, like, where are these breakthroughs, where are they going to come from? We think these tools are a really powerful accelerant. And so anecdotally, we hear that this is really helping, individual professionals, entrepreneurs accelerate their work, get new business, do more quickly. And I think soon we will see much more of that in some of the aggregate statistics.
Yeah, and I do think you've brought up such important points about training and AI and talent, right? But before we go into that, I'd just like to follow up a little bit because it's something that's been on the news recently. I think OpenAI has always been, at the forefront of, pushing generative AI to the masses. Recently, many different ways to monetize, right? And one thing that caught my eye recently, I think your CEO, Sam Altman, tweeted that, they're now going to allow erotica content for verified adult users. How do you think about where to draw the line?
I think the key principle there is, one of the things we've tried to embody at OpenAI is, saying we want to be responsive to what the world is asking for in our products and really give autonomy in the use. And so, principle we have is sort of, in our services, we're going to let adults be adults. And we know there are plenty of safeguards that we have to put in place to get to that place. So I think, what the sentiment that he was trying to express there is that we were working toward that type of product experience. And we have, again, a lot of safeguards to put in place to make sure that we can verify that someone is an adult. Otherwise, people will be defaulted into sort of a much sort of safer, in user ratings parlance in the US, sort of a PG-13 experience. But really trying, again, to be responsive to what our users and developers are sort of saying they want. And that's an evolving process. We really, it's important for us to listen, to understand what the world wants from our tools, and then try to use our iterative process to sort of make some of the updates to allow for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for that. So now let's move into talent, right, which is like a big part of this AI topic. Everyone talks about AI talent, but not just in engineers and whatnot, but also looking at policymakers who understand what questions to ask about procurement, ethics, deployment, et cetera, et cetera. Eunice, maybe I can come to you first. Google has done a lot around tech for good initiatives, especially in education and inclusion. Could you maybe share some examples whereby public-private collaboration has made a measurable impact for the region?
Yeah, I think, what gets me really most excited about AI and, with this tech for good theme is that is really not chatbots or, sort of productivity tools. I mean, those are really important and they're used in good ways. But it's really, using AI for societal change, for scientific discovery. So one of the proudest projects, I think, as a Googler, I am super proud of this thing called AlphaFold. I don't know if you guys have heard of AlphaFold. AlphaFold is basically a project where Google DeepMind has embarked on, okay, so to understand the human body, you need to first understand proteins, and you need to understand how proteins fold in a 3D manner. It used to take one PhD student 6 years, one PhD, to fold one protein. Okay, there are about 200 million proteins in the human body. AlphaFold folded all 200 million proteins in 3D form in months. And we've made AlphaFold available openly to scientists, to researchers, and you can imagine, the implications of that for society. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I'm very, very excited about what this means for her future. What this means for personalized medicine, what this means for cancer treatments, what this means for plastics, right? You need to break down plastics to be able to try to address the climate change sustainability problem. So really, even in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, we're seeing a lot of usage of AlphaFold. 85,000 researchers from across the region are using AlphaFold database to do their own research. And when we talk about talent, using AI for very, very productive, very, very significant societal innovations and experiments, I think that's really, really going to change how our children live in the world. Right here in Malaysia, we had this scientist from the UKM, Malaysia, Dr. Sudat, who is using AlphaFold to, I can't remember the name of the bacteria. I think it's Melioidosis or something, but basically it's a bacteria that is very, very, is more deadly than dengue, and he's doing research to understand that bacteria and to try to understand and then find a cure for it. So right here in Malaysia, right, you have scientists using these kind of applications because of AI to really impact society at large, not just for Malaysia but for the world.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cool. I mean, Annabelle, if I can come to you, I think, AWS also runs like lots of upskilling programs, very large scale stuff, cloud literacy programs. What works and what gaps are you seeing? If you may.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think Eunice's example was so amazing when you think about particularly how AI can be applied in very deep research. But we want to make sure when we work with governments that we're addressing every layer of the economy, right? And that students in school, so, you know, like through to K-12, obviously tertiary level education, technical skill sets and also non-technical skill sets, right? And so part of what we're doing, so like for example in Malaysia, we've trained over 200,000 people, and we'll see very similar numbers across many ASEAN countries. In Indonesia, we trained over 1 million people in cloud skills, and that's certified cloud practitioner skill set. So if you're a certified cloud practitioner, that in theory enables you to actually go out there and start building with our applications. And that of course includes AI applications as well. And these are very, very critical skill sets for people who are sort of at the boundaries, well, certainly a first step if you want a more technical career in being able to build on the cloud, but it's also really critical at the boundaries of non-technical and technical. Because that's when you start to understand, not just as a consumer, although I think what ChatGPT has done is amazing, right? And I think that has introduced AI to every single consumer. I often think about that as sort of the same revolution that we faced with the mobile internet, right? So that kind of accessibility. But certainly beyond just being, you know, a consumer using ChatGPT application, actually then going one step further and being able to build applications that you can potentially monetize into a new business model, into an innovative service. That's basically creating your next generation of entrepreneurs, of new business cases. If you're a government, you could be solving some very challenging citizen engagement problems. And that's what we're seeing at scale happen. So I think there are lots of opportunities to do that. I am actually very optimistic about AI skilling. And I know it's going to be a process, and we're going to have to work with governments everywhere to make sure we get as many of those programs out there to as many people. We want to think about inclusivity. We want to make sure that marginalized communities or underrepresented communities are going to be trained as well. But once we're done with all of that, it's like that's the revolution. And what the mobile phone did for connecting underserved communities and that leapfrog, I see the same thing with AI, but for generations of new entrepreneurs. So I think I have a 2-year-old son. I'm telling him, in my mind, I'm like, don't even worry too much about academia. We don't know what the world is going to look like in 20 years. But more importantly, like have that agility to pick up new skill sets, because I think that's the future that we're in.
Yeah, well, that would be such a good thing to hear as a child. so well put. We're running out of time, but I'd like to ask you each just one last question before we wrap. In a few words, in one sentence, what's the single most important thing you think ASEAN must get right for AI to deliver lasting impact? James, maybe you'd like to start?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll go back to the one line I mentioned earlier, which is, you know, infrastructure is destiny, and the importance of working together as a region, as individual countries, and, you know, of course, more broadly as a world, on sort of putting in place the infrastructure that's going to be needed so that the benefits of the intelligence age are shared broadly by all of our communities.
I think for me, maybe occupational hazard, but I think that the foundational policies and regulations need to be right, need to be pro-innovation in nature, need to enable all the opportunities that we spoke about during this panel, and to really find something that is, you know, fit for purpose for your country, right? Drawing on best practices that you can bring in from the region, because I think the choices that you make on policy today, on how you regulate your economy with regard to AI, is really going to determine your pathway for tomorrow.
And I agree with both the speakers, and would say maybe add one more to it, which is think about at the ASEAN level consistency, interoperability on policy, on supporting digital infrastructure investment, because ultimately the opportunity is not only for any individual ASEAN country, but it's for the region as a whole. And we've got such many different skill sets and strengths and weaknesses across different countries. So we should be working together as a whole region to make sure that we're going to be able to provide the best value proposition to the rest of the world. And so that ASEAN companies and countries can continue to grow their economies as a whole.
Right, exactly. So well put. For me, if there's one takeaway I'd like all of you to have today, is that, you know, in ASEAN, it's AI's future here wouldn't just be written by algorithms. It It will be written by the partnerships, the policy, and the people we're building for. Thank you all for joining us today.
Please welcome to the stage Chu Kok Wei, CEO Group Wholesale Banking and Corporate Treasurer, CIMB Group.
Good morning, Salam Sejahtera, and welcome to Kuala Lumpur. My name is Chu, and I run the wholesale banking business, as well as being the corporate treasurer for CIMB Group. Earlier this morning, if you attended the breakfast breakout, you would have heard from my colleague, Gurdeep, speaks on our commitment to sustainability. And later this afternoon, our group CEO, Novan, will speak on unlocking capital on the agenda of building ASEAN. At Wholesale Banking, we take pride for being a trusted partner for large private and public sector corporates, financial institutions, both banks and non-banks, as well as high net worth private banking clients looking to expand across the vibrant and fast-evolving ASEAN region. CIMB has the widest regional footprint in ASEAN, further enhanced by our presence in China, Hong Kong, and the United Kingdom. Locally, in each country, powered by extensive local knowledge, integrated banking network across all segments, CIMB is uniquely positioned to help you to unlock growth opportunity, to navigate the complex regulatory environment, and to establish long-term partnership with market leaders and policymakers in your business development. By mobilizing cross-border resources via our universal banking global account manager model, you will have a seamless and familiar one-stop experience, no matter where you expand your business into for the region. At CIMB, we delivered tailored solutions to help you to overcome early-stage challenges, such as consistent client due diligence process, account opening, solutioning customized to your group's need, all with the aim to help you to establish a strong market readiness and presence ahead of your business schedule. As ASEAN continue to integrate economically, we see tremendous potential in areas such as digital transformation, sustainable finance, and cross-border trades. Intra-ASEAN harmonization of practices is reducing the cost of doing business. CIMB is strategically positioned to help our client to capture all this opportunity via innovative and customized financing solutions, green and transitioning finance, structured trade finance to support the resilience of your supply chain, as well as capital raising strategies for regional expansion, both in the public and private markets. Through our integrated banking network, multilingual teams, and cross-border capability, we would enable seamless access to ASEAN markets for payments, collections, foreign exchange, liquidity management, or with the regional coordination but localized support and efficient execution of cross-border transactions. At CIMB, our commitment to you goes beyond transactions. We aim to be your long-term growth partner throughout the region. ASEAN is home for CIMB. Now, Before I end, I'd like to present to you a short testimonial by one of our long-standing ASEAN clients. A multi-country and multi-currency solution spanning across Malaysia, Singapore, and beyond, showcasing our ability to coordinate complex cross-border transactions seamlessly. Thank you very much.
Mapletree and CIMB share a strategic partnership built on mutual trust and shared growth. From our joint venture CIMB Mapletree Private Real Estate Fund in 2004 to our most recent collaboration on the development of Malaysia's largest logistics project, our relationship has flourished in both scale and depth over time. The team at CIMB has consistently demonstrated their competency and willingness to structure innovative financial solutions that support our growth priorities across our 13 markets. CIMB's financial strength, footprint, and expertise will be key in supporting Mapletree's growth ambitions in ASEAN and beyond.
Please welcome to the stage Benjamin Diokno, Monetary Board Member of the Central Bank of the Philippines, and Chia Sere, Governor of the National Bank of Cambodia, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Avril Hong.
Trying to figure out the seating arrangements in a very fast evolving landscape. I mean, we've just come off a weekend of intense trade negotiations between the US and Chinese delegations, and that's elicited a sort of positive response, setting up the stage for the Trump-Xi gathering that is expected to take place in Korea later in the week. So as I say, these changes in the environment coming in fast and furious, what does this mean for central banks? I mean, you just think to this month alone, where we've had numerous central bank surprises in terms of decisions out of the Asia-Pacific versus consensus economist estimates, and what some market participants were actually expecting as well, including for Banco Central. So let's discuss what all this is going to mean for financial resilience, for investor confidence as well. Dr. Diokno, maybe let's start with you first.
All right.
We just came off an interview on Bloomberg TV, and in it you highlighted how the Philippines can likely avoid a growth slowdown. For now, at least, that seems to be the case. But for the benefit of our audience here, talk to us about what you see as the drivers of Philippine growth in the year ahead.
Globally, the shift from economic integration to deglobalization now under Mr. Trump has a tectonic effect on the whole world, right? But each country would have a different effect. Like the Philippines is not as open as other countries like Singapore and Malaysia. So it's not going to be affected too much, but it's still going to be affected because of the sentiment of investors, right? It's difficult to invest in this kind of environment where you don't know what will be the tariff today or tomorrow or next week, right? So that would have a huge impact on capital investment.
What about in terms of the tariff impact? Because as we know in the Philippines, and this is something that we've raised in our previous conversations, that it's more about the second order effects of these levies. But what are you seeing in terms of the potential for the front-loading effect to ease? Are you seeing that impacting Philippine exports at the moment?
Yeah, because if you're a businessman, in terms of if you want to invest, you think of long term, right? Not just tomorrow or a year from now. But under this kind of environment, it's going to make kind of difficult to make an investment decision. if you're a local plant, you want to expand, that will have an impact also. What will be the tariff? Of course, many of the countries here in this part of the world would have a 19% tariff, but think of China, for example, or Australia. So, but you don't know. There is a shift every night, practically, right? So this uncertainty, I think, could have a global impact on investment. And in fact, that's really what's happening. Foreign direct investment, in general, has really gone down.
You raised China, and I'm glad you did, because one of the issues for economies in the ASEAN region might be because China can't export as much to the US, the presence of goods, that has to go somewhere. So as some put it, the issue of China dumping goods in the region, is that something as you see as a key risk?
That's a reality. Maybe we will benefit from Chinese cars instead of going to the US, we go to the Philippines at a much cheaper cost, but you don't really know what's going to happen, right? So there's a lot of moving parts, so it's kind of very difficult to predict, especially for an investor. So even today, we don't know exactly what Mr. Trump's tariff policy is. I think everybody agrees with that. Right?
Yes, the situation could quickly change, as we well know. When it comes to the tariff impact, Governor, I think the last time you spoke to Bloomberg, you didn't seem as worried about how it would affect Cambodia. And this was, I think, a few months back. Has that view changed in any way?
Well, first of all, thank you, Bloomberg, for having me again. My view on the tariff on Cambodia, and remember, we start off very high at 49%, and it came down to 19%. In terms of if there's such thing as winner, we're probably the biggest winner, although, I mean, it's not the usual tariff-free that we used to enjoy. The thing is, the kind of manufacturing products that we export to the US are very low value added product, mainly garment and shoes. Competitions-wise, it was tight, but as long as this tariff level remained comparable to our competitors, I think the factory will stay in Cambodia. What would be more concerning is the situation in the US itself in terms of their consumption level. If something is not doing well, because clothes and shoes you can buy once in a year and that's it, you stay with it. So if the situation, the economic situation is not well, people are spending less, you go less to, I don't know, Zara or H&M or whatever, and therefore that will impact us. At the moment, as it stands, as long as the US economy is doing well, consumptions continue to stay strong, I think we can manage this level of tariff.
That being said, when it comes to garment potential tariff exemptions, are you optimistic that you will see that for Cambodia?
In terms of?
So the Cambodia trade agreement with the US, there has been some optimism that there could be carve-outs from the range of products that Cambodia faces tariffs with the US from. Do you think that we could see that for garment exports to the US specifically? Because as we know, it makes up a huge portion of Cambodian exports. Is that something that could potentially be exempted from US tariffs?
Garment, I'm not sure I get your question. Still a bit sleepy. Garment are also subject to tariff.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Yesterday there was a signing, well, an agreement with President Trump and our Prime Minister here, and that is tariff-free for all American product going into Cambodia. At least we have this kind of agreement. Hopefully there won't be any tit for tat on, I'm going to increase to this.
So maybe not expecting an exemption for now. What about for when it comes to, I mean, you talk about the rivalry, I guess, between some of these other economies that rely on textiles, apparels, garment exports to the US for their economies. They also have 19, 20% tariffs, including Vietnam or Bangladesh, right? So what is the competitive advantage you see for Cambodia?
Well, I don't see, it's not like it came down to 19% and we'll be able to export more. At least we maintain the level that we have at the moment. For us, our strategy is not to continue to manufacture the same things. We need to grow up the value chain and create more value added. And that's exactly what we have been doing, trying to diversify, first of all, our export destinations, because we used to rely a lot on the US and the EU. At the moment, we'll look more inward, that is ASEAN, and our trade with ASEAN has grown quite considerably for the past 10 years. We have also looked towards other destinations such as Japan, China, and as part of RCEP, of course, we're going to take advantage of this. In terms of the manufacturing of garments, so destination, second is the type of product. So garment used to be about 75% of our export 10 years ago. Now it's say at around 50%. And so we're going towards semiconductor, car assemblies, bicycles, and all sort of products. So this is our strategies. The other things I think we have also looked into is agriculture. Now agriculture might be something that we look at as low value added, but I think it could be very strategic, because now that everyone is, people keep growing, people keep eating, and regardless the crisis situation, you will continue to eat, and we want to make sure that we can strengthen our agriculture sector and be able to position ourselves as maybe the kitchen of the world, hopefully.
I have to ask you, Governor, because this is coming at the time of border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. We saw over the weekend the signing of a joint declaration. Hopefully that moves things towards peace. But to what extent has the conflict perhaps detracted from some of these longer-term reforms that the Cambodian economy policymakers are trying to engage in?
We had this kind of conflicts before, but it's lasts shorter and to a lesser degree. This time it lasts longer, there's more casualty than it used to. And so there's no reason to shoot each other, right? Whatever it is, there's no reason for war. So it's very unfortunate. But with the ceasefire agreement signed yesterday, I hope we can keep talking and negotiate on whatever we disagree with and stop shooting on each other. The impact on both Thailand and Cambodia is as serious as each other. Cambodia used to have a lot of migrant workers in Thailand, about more than 1 million working there in various sectors. Now these workers have returned to Cambodia. So you imagine the impact on the Thailand manufacturing industry, but also imagine the impact on the Cambodian side to be able to absorb about 900,000 workers within a few months. It's impossible for us to allocate and find them jobs, and this is an issue on both sides. We are also losing the remittances that we used to receive from these migrant workers, and now we have to also help them to resettle in the country. We also import a lot from Thailand, agriculture and other household products. Now that we have this conflict, the import from Thailand stopped. So imagine the impact on the Thai manufacturing industry, plus not having workers. But for us, we have to find alternative elsewhere, which of course also are more expensive because it's new relationship, it's more, the distance is bigger, and so on and so forth. All this is not to the benefit of anyone, and I hope that with the peace agreement signed, we can start over our relationship with Thailand again.
The hopes for everyone really is that we get peace. On top of the economic impact also, not to mention the humanitarian toll.
Of course.
you talk about remittances. Would you perhaps be able to put a number to the impact on the Cambodian economy? I think on the Thai side, there had been some estimates that the economic impact could be upwards of $3 billion. Are there some calculations that the Cambodian side might be making?
We haven't looked into it in detail, and because there's so many factors into play, but in terms of remittance, I think we're losing about $100 million a month, so about 1.2 billion. But remittance doesn't play a major part in our GDP as in the Philippines. Of course, it's going to be negatively affected, but the direct impact, so the direct impact from the remittance is still manageable, but the other indirect impact from the returning of the migrant workers, from on the families who've been relying on these
and absorbing these
is
workers.
a lot bigger.
In the case of the Philippines, overseas remittances account for, if I'm right, are approximately around 12% of GDP. It's huge. It's maybe around $35 billion annually. So it is one of our buffer protection, right? Our gross international reserves at the moment is around $109 billion. That's equivalent to around 7 months of imports. The received doctrine is if you have 3 months worth of imports, you're okay. So we have 7 months worth of imports. So that keeps the peso kind of stable. Now, before that, we leave that topic on tariff. I think it matters what you export to the U.S. I think in the case of Kuala Lumpur, your main export also to the U.S. is semiconductors, just like in the Philippines. Okay, I think I was talking to your IT guy last night. You export something like 70 to 80% semiconductors. In our case, we export something like 60%. But to me, between export of goods and export of services, and I think Trump has forgotten about export of services. I think in the case of the Philippines, our export of services is much more important than export of goods. Okay, so that's one point.
So buffer, as you say, and perhaps a pillar of the Philippine economy, is that going to be enough to help offset what might be the slowing of private investments because of the controversy, the government graft scandal in the country?
Definitely. I think there are two major sources of foreign exchange from the Philippines. One is the BPO, or rather the overseas Filipino remittances, and the second is the income from business process outsourcing. They would contribute approximately the same amount, around $35 billion every year. That was not there before, maybe 10 years ago. We don't have that. Now we have the luxury of having these two sources, plus foreign direct investment. But foreign direct investment as a percent of our buffer is much less than the other two. So we're okay.
You were also talking earlier about, in terms of what's happening because of the corruption scandal, and you see there being a path towards all this, in your words, mess being cleared up by the end of next year. I wonder what we need to see for us to get there, and are there conversations between Banco Central and the Philippine lenders or lenders that are operating in the country to perhaps tighten restrictions on fund transfers that could have been facilitating corruption?
No, I would consider this corruption scandal as kind of a hiccup, right? It will be over in maybe 3 quarters, I would say. So we expect the economy to slow down to maybe a slightly less than 6% this year, and then recover to around 7% in 2027 and 2028. That's our growth path that before this scandal. I think the Philippine president really has to address this boldly and quickly, because as you know, in the case of the Philippines, the president serves for 1 term only, 6-year term. You got to do everything that you want to do within that 6 years. And he has already finished the first three years, so it's the second half of his term. If he wants to to think of his legacy to future generation, he's got to fix this quickly and boldly. And I think the president is just doing that. Okay? And so I think that by 2026, I would see 2026 as a transition year. So maybe he's doing it now, fourth quarter of this year, plus the first half of next year. That's 9 months, and I think the second half will be okay on the path, the growth path that we have earlier projected.
Governor, speaking of issues that need fixing in Cambodia, also what has raised some concern is the presence of scam centers. We are seeing perhaps, does that affect negatively the impression that Cambodia gives to foreign investors, and what can be done to mitigate such sentiment?
So these scam centers news that you all been reading, it is a very concerning allegation and very damaging to the image of Cambodia. But I want to assure you that Cambodia doesn't summarize to scam center. We have a very good investment environment. We have clean source of energy. 60% of our energy supplies are from renewable sources. We have also improved our logistics with the launch of the new airport, which is fully owned by Cambodian, financed by Cambodian, contrary to a lot of the headlines saying that it is Chinese built. It is designed by a British company, consulted by the Singaporean companies and many other international companies, constructed by a Chinese constructions with about 90% of Cambodian workers. So I want to set that clear on this. Now come back to the scam issues. It is very, of course, damaging. And I have to say, we're kind of relieved that it's brought out, because you can see how intricate it's connected to the whole entire world. They are the company structures are so opaque that only the work of CIA can discover. And then you see links to these companies in many countries in the regions. Scam centers are everywhere. Unfortunately, Cambodia sounds very exotic, so the news like to bring that up all the time. But I can assure you, and you have to be honest with ourselves, that it is everywhere. What matters is that where I sit at the central bank as the regulators is we want to be a transparent and credible member of the international financial industry. We want to make sure that our financial sector is transparent, that our economy continue to be attractive, because this is what we live for. We need investment, we need trust, we need confidence. And these stories, I hope, will then get everyone together to work. We're in the ASEAN summit with all the countries in. I hope that we can continue to work together, because to be honest, the victims, the center are probably in Cambodia and other countries here in the region. The victims are in the US, in the UK. The companies who benefit are also in the US. You have the crypto assets seized in the US. You have properties in the UK. You have companies linked in Hong Kong, in Singapore, and everywhere else. And so you see how complex it is. But at the end of the day, I think what we need to be doing individually, beside, of course, fighting the scam center, is I've talked about it yesterday, is the digital literacy of our people.
Right.
Because
so,
the people who fall prey to this scam are a young, ambitious student from South Korea who just want a job, and he accepts an online offer without checking anything. The victims are an elderly person in the UK who is desperate for lifelong love and fall prey to these scammers. And there's so many. Now, the session earlier talked about AI, and I was talking with my son about AI, and he said, I was trying to scare him with something on what I saw on social media, and I said, Mom, this is AI, and I said, how do you know? He said, before it was harder to spot. You have to find what is AI and what is real. Now, the problem is to try to spot what is real because everything else is AI.
Governor, I guess to your point, it's also important about digital literacy. And some of these cases that you've raised are truly heartbreaking. But I wonder, how does that complicate decision-making or policy-making at the Cambodian Central Bank? What sort of specific safeguards might you be putting in place?
We have put in place, we have tightened our AML-CFTs measures. We've been calling banks and discuss about these issues and potentially try to have early detections on frauds and unusual activities, put it simply. These are the measures that we put in place, and we stand ready to cooperate with any other authorities who are investigating the issues and make sure that we go deep down to the root cause of it and make sure that we can, of course, clear our name and also help the victim come to terms with all these issues.
Okay. Just also before I have to let both of you go, because we are sort of running out of time, wanted to get your thoughts as well on some of the market moves that we're seeing. It's very interesting how even amid a risk-on environment or uncertainty, either way, we see the price of precious metal, gold, rallying really hard. And some of the fundamentals behind this, as many market participants have highlighted, has got to do with central bank buying. I wonder, amid all this, has Banco Central, have the Cambodian Central Bank been scooping up more gold?
You know, our gold reserves, as a part of our of the gross international reserves, is approximately now 13%. That's pretty high compared to the other central banks. And I think the price of gold is because of the uncertainty, global uncertainty. Where do you put your money at this time, right? So that's where the demand is, gold. Rather, used to be US dollars, right? But now people are doubting whether the present situation is sustainable, so they'd rather invest in gold. But so that's my take on this. It's the uncertainty that is keeping the price of gold high. Okay.
So is Banco Central buying more gold or looking to buy even more
No,
gold?
I said look for more gold. We're actually, there was a time when we were passive participants in this kind of trade.
And even sold gold.
But we decided to sell gold. I said we should keep gold only as at 10% of our reserves. And so when it hit around 12, 13%. So when we bought gold at, what, $2,000, now it's close to 5,000.
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
What about Cambodia?
Well, it's very interesting because Cambodia is a very dollarized economy, and we have been having these policies of trying to promote the use of local currency, and now I see the de-dollarization movement has become global. Every country now try to diversify their reserve into different currencies, not just gold. But of course, to the point of Secretary, is that in a time of uncertainty, you try to diversify your portfolio as much as possible. And gold seems to many of us as a safe alternative holding. But what's also interesting is that for me personally, I think gold is interesting because it's something that you can touch, you can feel, and it has an industrial values. But then Bitcoin's price has also been shooting up, and there's also some central banks holding Bitcoins, cryptocurrency, as reserve. This is actually a more interesting sort of development that when we don't have any cryptocurrency in our foreign exchange reserve. But it's also interesting to see, you know, how people react to these kind of uncertainties.
Yeah. You talk about diversifying. I wonder also if you could talk to us about how open the likes of Cambodia are to diversifying the storage of gold beyond some of the places where traditionally it's being stored. Is that something that Cambodia is looking into?
We have been looking into this. Of course, we diversified not just the type of reserves we have, but also the type of instruments that we hold. So beside Treasury, we have bonds, US Treasury bonds, we have other types of instruments. Besides US dollar, we have also other type of currencies, emerging economies, other developed economies. Besides the geographical
storage
of gold, we also need to diversify it. We have a few locations considered. So all these are
What are some of the locations that are being considered?
You have to
do
London
some
or
more
France.
research on this.
The gold has to be abroad, okay, in a safe depository or Swiss. Otherwise, you can't sell it. We have lots of gold in the Philippines. We can't sell that. It's got to be in London or in France, okay? It's just paper trading, actually.
There's been some talk about China being a potential place where central banks might store their gold. Is that something Cambodia might be considering?
We are exploring all possibilities.
And in the Philippines, is that
No,
something?
we're happy with London or France as our depository.
All right. On that note, thank you very much to both our panelists. Great to hear your insights. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Jane Sun, CEO of Trip.com Group, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Anders Mellin.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being with us. I've been told to remind you that after this session, there's a 30-minute break. So we're going to be here for 20 minutes. Bear with us, and then you can go get some more coffee. Jane Sun, you're the CEO of Trip.com Group, one of the world's largest travel agencies. You oversee an operation with more than 40,000 employees, more than $7 billion of revenue, built on people wanting to experience the world. This is the burning question that I know everybody in the room has. Where did you go on your last vacation?
I combine work and leisure very closely. I was having some meetings in Thailand, and I went to the event we sponsored, which is the Blackpink show in Thailand. So I just came back from Thailand.
How was the weather?
It's lovely. I love to invite all of you to join us to celebrate many wonderful events around the world.
I know that I, as a journalist, whenever I read a news story, I always try to sort of deconstruct how it was written and why, and who may have leaked certain information. Very different to how my wife reads news. Is it the same for you when you go travel? Do you try to look for certain things that others might just not be thinking about? And if so, what do you think those things are that you really pay attention to?
Yes, for sure. I think travel really gives you a tangible feeling of what's really going on in the world. In the media, there is always negative information, but I have been traveled to many hundreds of countries. I have never seen bad people, evil people. Everywhere we go, I try to talk to the mothers in the refugee camps of Syria and Lebanon, in Africa, the poor villages, in Thailand, in UK, in the USA, in China. Many countries, the topics we discuss are very similar. We want our young people to have good education, for young people to have good career, for families to have peaceful and prosperous lives. So the topics we talk about are very much similar. It's not an American dream, a European dream, a China dream. It's a dream for human beings. So I very much like to use travel as a way to link people together.
You'd like to talk about the different categories of travel as the E's. there's events and travel, mainly for young people, elderly friendly for retirees who can afford to travel and see the world, education and travel for families who want to try to show their kids sights and culture as best as they can. You've also mentioned emerging markets. During Lunar Year, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa are big destinations. Right. Which of these do you see having the most potential for Trip.com in the next few years?
Sure. Every year we look at the data and we look at the new trends and come up with new innovations to address these needs. So the 3 E's you just mentioned represents the new trends. The first E is events plus travel. When you look at the Gen Zs, they no longer go to traditional travel destinations. You need to give them a reason, a good experience for them to think about travel to that region. So events become very important. Events such as Taylor Swift shows, Blackpink, G-Dragon, Olympic Games, F1s become very popular. So what we do is we center around these major events plus a travel package. And that is become more and more popular in the young generation. The second E is elderly friendly. In many countries, people get retired when they are very healthy, very energetic. Now they have time, they have money to travel. So what we do is we talk with the destination partners to make sure we bring these people to these destinations during the slow season, because the retired people can stay longer. They don't have to go there during the peak season. So our destination partners love to host these retired population during the slow season to fill in the gaps. The third one is emerging market with educational purposes. So in the winter time, we saw Australia, New Zealand, and even South Africa become the top 3 destinations. Nelson Mandela's cell become the most visited area during this time. So we work again with this emerging market to promote long-tail travel destinations. In the summer, Iceland, Greenland, and Finland become very popular. So hopefully promoting these long-tail emerging market will enable us to address some of the concern for overly populated over-tourism issues around the world.
And of these 3, where do you see the most potential in terms of growing market share and in terms of growing revenue?
I think for the events plus travel, because whatever is liked by the young people, we need to pay attention to, because that stands for the future. So all the new initiatives are centered around the young people. But these people, the spending power may not be as high as the people who are already established. So both of these 3 pillars are very important for us.
Probably no generation has been more overanalyzed than Gen Z, so we got to make sure to do our part there too. You've been CEO for 9 years now. Incidentally, you became the CEO around the time TikTok was founded. Has what young people want in terms of travel, has that changed over these 9 years? And can you pinpoint some specific examples?
Yeah, very much so. The older generation, my parents' generation, their English was not very good. So they feel travel with a group of good friends really make them feel comfortable. But the young people, when they grow up, their parents already bring them to travel around the world. Very sophisticated. The English is very good. So the new trend for these people needs to be personalized. It's not one product fits all. So we have customized the tool to be suitable for these young people. The second one is it needs to be experiential rather than jump on the bus, take some photos. They want to do something, engage with the community, learning cooking classes, taking language classes. It's becoming very, very, very popular. The third one is also digital. Young people, they hardly go through the offline booking system. So providing information online become very important. All the product needs to be made available digitally. So for destination partners, we also want to team up with them so that when they offer information on the ground, we have digital forms, which is location-based. That will help our the local destinations to achieve the best when we host these young people.
Do you think this focus on experiences and wanting to see and touch and feel, or touch and feel the country, not just see it, do you think that's going to hold also when Gen Z starts, you know, having kids and have to drag around a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old and make sure that they hit nap time? Do you think that's going to continue?
Yeah, certain things will be inherited. For example, our parents' travel habit. In a way, part of us will inherit these travel habits. But new generation will always evolve. So we focus a lot on the new trends, new technology, because young people stands for the future. They're always right.
The company obviously has partnerships all over the world, hotels, airlines, governments, you name it. The revenue mix is a bit more concentrated. It currently sits at 85% from Greater China, 15% the rest of the world. Are you happy with this balance, or are you working on ways to shift it a bit?
Yeah, I think as people, travel is very global. So globalization is very important for us. Right now, for Chinese people travel within China, it represents 60% versus 100% many years ago. And the growth for that segment is 2 to 3 times the GDP growth rate. The second piece is taking people from China to the rest of the world. The growth rate is about 20 to 30%. And I was looking at the numbers last year, 2024, Chinese people spend about 250 billion when they travel around the world. The second player is USA, 150 billion. And then South Korea spend about 30 billion. So still significant portion are spent overseas, which brings great opportunities for overseas partners. The third part is foreign to foreign, which is taking people from Kuala Lumpur to Dubai, from Dubai to UK, from UK to New York, from New York to Tokyo. That business is growing very rapidly at a rate more than 50 to 60% year over year. That is, when we started that business, it only contributes to less than 1%. By the end of last year, it contributes to 15%. And the third piece is attracting people from the rest of the world into Asia. Asia offers a great history, travel destination, beautiful sceneries, a great culture. So that piece is also growing very rapidly. So if you look at in the future, I think international travel should account for more than 50% of the overall business.
One of my favorite books growing up was 80 Days Around the World by Jules Verne, which hopefully everybody in the room knows. Tell us about this slightly crazy but also very interesting offering that your company has had and is now reviving.
Sure. Trip.com target at 50% business travelers, another 50% are high-end leisure travelers. So the most expensive tour pre-COVID we sold cost about 200,000 USD per person per trip, 80 days around the world. A very expensive tour. And guess how long did it take us to sell these packages? Take a guess. 1 day, 1 month, 1 year? 1 hour. Wow, very good. 17 seconds. Flash sale. So after COVID this year, we relaunched this product. It cost 550,000 USD. We expect a very flash sale, very quick flash sale as well. That talks about the buying power of Trip.com customers. I was with the Middle East airports executives, and they told me that Trip.com customers' buying power is 2 times to 3 times as high as the average buyers. So instead of one airport welcome our customers, then now many airports, many airlines, many hotels love for Trip.com to bring customers over there because as long as quality is good, we can upsell for the hotels, for the airlines.
Can you talk about the work that Trip.com has done to try to reel in these big spenders? Because obviously they must be sought after by almost everybody.
Yes. So internally, we have a formula which we call the 5-5-4-4-3. 3 means your performance is at the market level. 1 and 2 is below the market level. 4 is above the market level, but the barrier of entries is not too high. And 5 is way ahead of anybody else in the market. So the 2 elements we assign value 5s are service and branding. Why that's important? Because if you build a service like Four Seasons or Singapore Airlines, the barrier of entries is very high. So if you call Trip.com call center, within 30 seconds, a live person will answer the call to help you to solve the issue. And if something happened, for example, there was a tsunami in Japan, and Middle East might have some conflicts, within 2 minutes, our team will reach out to our customers on the ground, make sure we move them to the safe hotel, offer hot meal, hot shower. The very next day, if they want to come back to their home country, we'll make prioritized arrangement with the airlines to rescue them. So with that service, customers have peace in mind when they travel with Trip.com. With that service, we also built a very strong branding. How many brands you would trust by giving them 200,000 USD within 17 seconds? Very few, right? So service and branding are valued very high in our internal formula. The second piece is technology and products are valued at 4. We have thousands of engineers and product team innovate our products to become the pioneer in each line of business. But once you launch these products, your product will be copied by all the players in the industry. So you just have to keep on investing in these items to stay very innovative, to stay ahead of the market. And the last item we value at 3 is pricing. Although as one of the leading player, we can always negotiate very good deals for our customers, but we never brand ourselves as the lowest price leader in the market. Because if you start to do that, then you only attract very price-sensitive customers. We want to make sure we stay competitive on pricing, and young customers knows when you search on Trip.com, you will find the best price, but we never brand ourselves as the lowest price leader. If you ask our customer, why do you use Trip.com? They will always tell you, excellent customer service.
One thing that surprised me, to spin off of that, one thing that surprised me when I read through the annual report is that the company actually has 6,000 physical stores in 300 cities all over China, up from 5,700 back in 2023. Does this play into the attempt to try to get more high-end customers, or like give us an idea of why you need a physical store in these days where we would almost expect an AI agent to like whip up a trip for us, just pay here, click, done.
Sure. So you have very loyal customers which knows Trip.com very well. They can place a call online, no problem. But in the remote cities, 3rd tier, 4th tier cities, still people will have hesitation when they place orders for more than 5,000, for example. So that in that case, if you have physical store near their neighborhood, in a major shopping mall, in their office, give them the confidence. You're there, right? Somebody will be able to help you. So we use online and offline combined to increase the confidence for our customers.
While all of us make travel plans, the world moves. Some political leaders come, some go. Some countries become better friends, some fall a little out of friendship. Without going into any specifics, because many of these people are here in this town at the moment, do any of these kinds of undercurrents tend to impact travel patterns or where consumers choose to go?
Yeah, we saw the destinations policy influence customers' decision-making process. The first thing is peaceful destination will get attractions. When there is news break, for example, there is a war in certain country, it's in a remote area. It doesn't impact the major capital cities, but people are very worried because they feel they need to go to have a good time. They don't want to risk their families and risk themselves for doing that. So have a very safe and peaceful destination is the first consideration. The second one is friendly visa policy. Lots of people want to do last-minute booking in our platform. For 50% of the flight bookers make their reservation the day before they fly. 50% of the hotel bookers make their reservation on the same day when they decide to travel. So give a long-term visa or visa-free policy, really make it very convenient. People will think, oh, next week I have some time. Where should I go? Oh, Singapore has a free visa policy. I will go there. So to an extent, if the destination can offer a free visa, that will attract high-end customers. The third one is direct flight. So we noticed the Middle East, the GCC countries, increased the direct flights. Most of the Asian countries increased the direct flights. That is very helpful because that saves customers from switching time. They only have 3 days, 4 days for long weekend. If you have direct flight for certain island, it will attract customers.
So it sounds like as long as it's easy to get there and safe,
yeah,
consumers tend to tune out
exactly
the noise.
Exactly.
Understand. Can you, quickly before we have to end, talk a little bit about the next 5 years, the next 10 years? Which are the big areas where Trip.com Group is focusing?
We will focus a lot on innovation. So technology and AI become very important. We already see great results for AI investment. First area is user's interface. Used to be you need to search for a hotel, 5-star, 2 kids, pets friendly with a swimming pool, and then search engine will come up with some recommendation. Now you can have a conversation with Trip Genie. It will automatically come up with the right result. The second one is productivity. Our engineers told me that they can save coding time anywhere between 30 to 50% of the coding time. So with same number of the engineers, they will be able to produce more for our customers. The third one is customer satisfaction rate. Because of AI understands you better, when we recommend certain packages to you, it will be more suitable for your family to travel. And lastly is the content generation. Using AI, we're able to generate the videos, audios, and pictures more efficiently. So we are very excited for the innovation technology has brought us. But everything needs to be done with a human touch. Travel is a human touchable activity. I think if you have lots of agents, maybe you can have one agent to have meetings for you, one agent to work for you. But for the travel, I think I want to do it by myself.
Jane, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your attention. We go now into a 30-minute break.
Thank you for your time. I love to invite you to come and visit us in Asia. Thank you.
Please take your seats. The program will begin now.
Chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life. It's a very great threat to our country. And for these reasons, starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations.
Please welcome to the stage Maninda Sidhu, Canada's Minister of Export Promotion, International Trade and Economic Development, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Haslinda Armin.
There you are. I was like, where did you go?
I went the long way, the scenic route. Thank you for joining us. Over the last 70 years, the US played a key role in building the global trading system. It's now playing a key role in unraveling that system. And some say there is no turning back. What the US has done with its interventions, with its moves, with tariffs, are basically now testing the global trading system. And they say this is the biggest test since the Great Depression. Of course, we have the right man to talk about it. Maninda Sidhu, Minister of Export Promotion, International Trade and Economic Development of Canada. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, talk to us about how it's all shaping up. You know, we talk about how we're seeing an unraveling, but when you take a look at the numbers out there, pretty resilient, both in terms of trade and growth. Where are we with the situation at this point in time?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Bloomberg and, of course, Haslinda for welcoming me here. We're here in the Asean region with the Prime Minister, but, you know, you talk about trade, and I can talk about trade all day, as I was telling you backstage. I did this before politics for about 13 years. I was a custom broker facilitating trade for hundreds of businesses in Canada. And it's a unique time, as you mentioned. There's a lot of changes than there were in the past. Things are shifting. Trading partnerships are shifting almost every day. You're seeing a new country sign another trade agreement. But I think in terms of businesses, they're asking for certainty. You know, it's the instability that really kills investments, that makes them hold back capital. And we, as a stable, reliable trading partner in Canada, need to push along. And we're doing that here in the region with ASEAN as a very important trading partner. But when you look at the bigger picture of the 15 trade agreements that Canada has with roughly 51 countries, access to about 1.5 billion consumers, you know, how do you push that forward? How do you work with like-minded partners? And here in the region, you know, you talk about CPTPP trading bloc, you talk about what we're doing with the EU. I think it's time for countries to come together and really show that rules-based trading works, especially at a time when the system is being tested. And so I think, you know, when you're looking at the bigger picture, businesses count on that. They count on us sitting down as politicians to work out these things.
So no deglobalization, no chance of decoupling. We're intact. It's just being reshaped?
There is a big reshape, for sure. And countries are looking at each other. You see what's happening here in Malaysia, what they're doing around ASEAN, bringing countries together to talk about inclusivity, talking about sustainability. But you can't do this alone in this society. We've learned after the pandemic that the world is very closely knitted. And you need to work with partners around the world, and that's what Canada will continue to do.
But Minister, you talk a lot about the deals that came out of Malaysia. Yes, the US signed a deal with Malaysia, with Thailand, with Cambodia, and we had other deals as well. But some say they're short on details, and these deals may not even outlive the summit. What's your take on how much has been achieved here? How much of a game changer has it been?
So I can speak to what Canada is doing. I think it's very important what we're doing in terms of developing a relationship here in the ASEAN region. Just a few weeks ago, we signed with Indonesia, a free trade agreement with Indonesia, which was huge for Canada, an economy, a population of over 275 million people. But also yesterday, the Prime Minister and I announced that we're going to fast-track our conversations with the Philippines to fast-track a free trade agreement. We're working on a Canada-ASEAN free trade agreement with 10 nations here. But that's very important. Why the ASEAN region is very important for me to mention for your viewers. Last year, ASEAN-Canada saw growth about 10%, which was the fastest growing region in the world for trade. And I think we need to continue that pace. And you look at what's been happening over the last decade, it's about over 80% of trade growth with the ASEAN region. And so we're seeing a lot of momentum there. And why are we seeing that momentum? I think it's important to mention that it's not just government driving this, it's businesses driving this forward. You talk about what Canada has here, fast-growing region, consumer base, you look at the middle class, purchasing power. All of this is going to require power, as you know, energy. And Canada has that energy. When you talk about LNG, you talk about our nuclear technology that we have, but they also need food security. And that's where Canada can play a big role in terms of agriculture. It's beyond fertilizer, it's agri-tech, it's what we're doing, it's our expertise that really what we can offer to the region. But beyond that, it's about aerospace. Here in the region, you're familiar with Bombardier, you're familiar with Airbus. And so what more can we do? And we can sign all the trade agreements we want, but unless businesses use those trade agreements, that's when you really get the needle moving. And that's what I saw from the private sectors. Really utilization matters. You can sign a trade agreement, but you need the businesses on board.
Let's unpack some of that. You talk about the trade agreements. You signed one with Indonesia. Who's next in the next 12 months? I mean, what can we expect?
Yeah, and so I mentioned the Philippines, of course.
So that's going to be a trade agreement signed?
That's right. We're aiming to get it done next year. We're aiming to get Canada-ASEAN done next year. Look, we have a very ambitious target. Prime Minister Carney has given me a mandate to expand trade, non-U.S. trade, double that. That's roughly $300 billion of additional trade with non-U.S. partners. I've also been given the mandate to attract investments. We're building these big nation-building projects in Canada, and I think that's important to talk about today as well, because we know there's already a comfort level from Malaysia through Petronas investing in one of the largest LNG projects in our history.
So LNG is an area that you're interested in terms of exporting to this part of the world. Any other commitments from countries right now apart from Malaysia?
Absolutely,
China?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, the region needs energy, right? And so
could you shed some light on some of the countries that have given commitments?
So in July, we launched our first LNG Canada facility, our first shipment outside the U.S. So it was historic for our country. It was a milestone because a lot of our energy supplies went to the U.S. And in July was our first shipment to Asia. We have a competitive advantage in terms of shipping times, in terms of the clean LNG that we're producing, but it's also nuclear. I was in conversations with my counterparts in Indonesia, in Philippines. Indonesia has over 15,000 islands they need to power with, and they're looking at SMR technology, small modular reactors. In the Philippines, they have over 8,000 islands they need to power, and they're looking at our SMR technology. And it's no longer a myth. SMR has been talked about for a long, long time. And just last week, Prime Minister Carney announced a $2 billion investment in Ontario in the Darlington SMR project, which is the first commercialized SMR project in the G7. And so we are really a leader in terms of energy, and we're looking to this region to buy that energy. And you already see those shipments coming across. The data is all out there, but we can do more.
I may have missed the countries in this part of the world that's committing to LNG exports.
Yep.
So Who would they be again?
So you look at South Korea, you look at Japan, you look at Malaysia. Of course, there's Singapore's in there as well, and so there's a lot of countries in this region that are purchasing our LNG, and we have a handful of more projects being developed because we have the resources in place, and now we're putting the capital behind it. Investors are coming out from all around the world. Petronas, it's the single largest private investment in our country's history, over $40 billion to build that LNG facility.
Part of the reason you're diversifying in an accelerated way in this part of the world is because of the pressure coming from the US. It's already threatening an additional 10%. If you could shed some light on the kind of impact that may have on the country. Some say that perhaps Canada could be seeing a recession.
So when I look at the region, I look at the Indo-Pacific as a whole, it's nothing new to Canada. I mean, we launched our Indo-Pacific strategy a few years ago under a previous administration. We put money behind that, over $2.3 billion. And so Canada has long been looking at this region for growth, but also it's about mutual prosperity. And that's why Canada can have those conversations, because it's never a one-way street with Canada. It's always two-way with Canada. We're not competing, we're complementary economies. And so I think when you look at what's happening down in the US, Canada has been positioning to the Indo-Pacific for a long, long time, and businesses have really been leading that charge. And now as a government, we're making sure we're here, we're present in the region to build on that relationship. And so I think that's very, very important to mention.
But the US remains a very important market. What's the next step? How do you counter what's coming from the US?
And so when I come to the US, very important trading partner for Canada, will always be a trading partner with Canada. Our geography will not change but at the same time, my job as the Minister of International Trade is to look at opportunities beyond the US. There is another minister that does Canada-US trade, Minister LeBlanc. My focus is looking at the rest of the world in terms of what more can we do to diversify our trading partners, what more can we do to attract investments coming into Canada. But coming back to the US, we'll continue to have that conversation. Our workforce, our supply chains are very tightly knit, and that will always be the case. But at the same time, we also need to be able to look outwards.
We have to talk about China, which is also a major market for you. What's the strategy there? And how do you engage with China at a time that you have to be careful not to ugh the President of the United States? How do you get that fine balance right?
So China, and the conversation around China, in Canada is a very important trading partner for sure. It's our second largest trading partner after the US. Are there things to work through? Of course. That's something that you deal with neighbors. You always have to work through things and challenges that come up at the same time. But we're also looking at the opportunities in China, right? Our agriculture sector ships a lot to China. We have a lot of consumer goods going that way, and that's why they're our second largest trading partner. And so there's always going to be a give and take in that relationship, and that's in any relationship. And so, I sat across the table from my counterpart and really restarted that dialogue. For over 7 years, we didn't have any dialogue with China, and you can't have that in this time. You need to be able to have diplomacy. You need to be able to sit at the table and work through challenges. And so we agreed to restart our JETSI Commission to have our officials start talking, working through the challenges. Because that's very, very important in terms of dialogue.
And what are the challenges?
Lots of challenges. I mean, of course, there's challenges, opportunities. We're working through agriculture, our pet food, beef, canola. These are some of the things that we want to work through with China, but it's also looking at the opportunities. What more can we do in terms of finding out the path forward for businesses? Because businesses want us to do work with China, and we as a government have to facilitate those conversations.
And what might you sign with China in the next 12 to 24 months?
I think it's a constructive, pragmatic conversation. It's really step by step. Where do businesses want us to go? And that conversation is very live right now. But first and foremost, we want to look at the opportunities, but also work through some of the challenges that we have in terms of our market access in agriculture.
And are you confident that perhaps China and the rest of Southeast Asia could help counter the drop in trade between Canada and the US
so when I
in an expeditious way?
When I look at the US and history, Haslinda, I think, 25 years ago, trade with the US was at 90%. Now it's around 75%. It's not about replacing the US, it's about adding on to what more we can do. And that's where Canada has a leg up our diversity in Canada really keeps us connected, the people-to-people ties, and the attachments that Canadians have with this part of the world is very important to utilize. And so when I'm talking to chambers across the country in Canada, they want to do more in the region. But as you know, you got to show up. You got to be present. You got to be here to formulate those relationships, and that's exactly what this government is doing.
The thing is this, right? ASEAN is a block of 10 nations, all at different stages of development, all with different levels of regulation. You talk about predictability. Some say there is a lack of predictability among ASEAN nations because they're at different stages. How are you reading into that, and how are you, I guess, how is that shaping the way you look at the region?
You're right. There's countries of different sizes. We're building up that capacity, and we're here. We've been offering funding to build up that capacity because every country is different in terms of development. And the conversations I'm having with my counterparts yesterday and today is what more can we do to keep up that momentum to get the Canada-ASEAN FTA signed by next year. And we need to keep up that momentum. You know, you saw 11th member come in yesterday, Timor-Leste. Congratulations to them. But the trading bloc is growing. And we also want to grow with that trading bloc as well.
And are there targets? Are there targets when it comes to what you want to achieve with the region?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the target that we've set as a government, $300 billion within the next 10 years, and ASEAN will play a big part of that. And I mentioned some of the sectors, but it's also about investment attraction. You know, we passed legislation in June as a government to get major projects built faster. So that means projects that were typically taking 5, 10, 15 years for permitting, we're bringing that down to 2 years, working with provinces, territories, and our indigenous communities. Projects like energy, projects in critical minerals, in our ports. We know in order to get $300 billion of trade out the door to other parts of the world, we need to build that capacity at our ports. And so we're asking, and I'm welcoming investments from all around the world. I'm hosting delegations that are coming to Canada to look at those opportunities. Because we are in a building mode. You know, we're going to build big, we're going to build bold, and we're going to build now. And I think when you look at what we're doing in terms of building, our major projects office is a key role in that. So by November 15th, we're going to release another set of projects that we're going to fast track approvals for to make sure we're able to build. And so I encourage those listening and those in the crowd to look at Canada for investments because we're going to need about $500 billion of investments to build these big projects.
You know, as you make your trips around the world, are you doing business differently in this part versus, you know, Europe, for instance, the African continent? Is there a differentiating way of dealing with the different regions?
I think business, from my private sector experience, is a common language. You need to show up. You need to have those relationships. You need to build on those relationships. And so me as a trade minister is the same conversation I'm having with businesses in Europe as when you compare it to here in the region. Businesses need to formulate relationships. You need to be able to have our chambers of commerce comfortable with our trading agreements. Like I said, if they're not able to utilize the trading agreements, they're no good. And so businesses play a key role in this. And so yesterday we had a good meeting with the Canada-ASEAN Business Council, which are doing great work here in terms of building that business-to-business ties. And we need to continue on that because as a government, you can set all the policy you want. And if the businesses are not using it, what good is it? And so we want to make sure we bring businesses along at the same time. And so the Prime Minister and I are having great conversations with the business community here of what more we can do.
What's the call to action? Lots of investors who are possibly interested in doing business with Canada. What's the call to action for them? And where are the biggest opportunities, under-leveraged opportunities at the moment?
I'm going to be shameless in my plugs for Canada because
Go ahead.
I am the chief salesman for Canada. Look, it's not just coming from me. IMF has recently said that Canada is going to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world when you look at the forecasting. And we're going to be building big projects. Our Prime Minister is very focused in getting things going. And we're going to require a lot of partners to come from around the world. And they're already familiar with Canada. There's a level of comfort already there in our energy projects, in our ports. You see DP World from Singapore, big investments in Canada. There are others that are investing in Canada. But we need to have partners to do this, and we can't do it alone. And that's where Canada is open for business. And I want to say those who are listening that come to Canada, explore the opportunities we have what the world needs.
Apart from energy?
Energy, you talk about agriculture, you talk about our innovation in AI. This region is going to need a lot of data centers. What's going to power those data centers is Canadian energy. and we need to build on that partnership. But also AI. Canada is the godfather of AI. And as Canadians, you'll notice this, Haslinda, we're very modest. We don't like to brag. But I think it's time to start bragging about what we have to offer here in the region, because countries are becoming more ambitious, they're becoming more aggressive, and we need to match that same energy as Canadians as well.
I do want to pick up on data centers because that is a growing business and there's a lot of appetite for AI. Powering those data centers has become really key. How are you looking at ensuring sustainability, and how are you teaming up? What kind of partnerships are you looking at when you take a look at projects, for example, in JB of Malaysia?
And I think it comes back to sustainability. You're correct. And Canada has some of the cleanest LNG in the world to power these data centers. But we're making sure we're partnering up with partners all around the world. You speak of the Middle East. We're looking at signing a foreign investment promotion and protection agreement with the UAE. I was just in Ecuador. I relaunched Mercosur conversations with Brazil and that region. And so we're leaving no stone unturned in terms of making sure that Canada is at the forefront of this, because there is a digital transition, as you're seeing firsthand. Everyone's seeing that. And what role can Canada play in this? And we have the expertise. There's a lot of data centers that are opening up in Canada because of our climate. Our cooler climate, as you know, energy costs in some parts of the world are not as competitive as Canada. And so we are attracting a lot of foreign direct investment at the same time, but there's a role to play with partners here in the region as well.
And are you in conversations with the partners here? Possibility of tie-ups in the next 1-2 years?
Absolutely, those conversations.
Where exactly? Would Malaysia be one of them?
They're in the region, for sure, in the Indo-Pacific region. But I mean, when you're talking about this, it's bringing partners together from different countries, right? It's Middle East, it's here in the ASEAN region, and coming to Canada is really utilizing that innovation, that skill set we have. We have the workers to power this. We have the most educated workforce in the world in terms of Canadians, and so we have a lot to offer there. But it's also about partnerships. And what I heard from my counterparts here is, how can we do more cultural exchanges? How can we have more students and education back and forth? Because that's what really builds the ties for future business to basically happen. And so we're looking at every opportunity there is to make sure we're able to continue formulating these relationships in the region. And so here with the Prime Minister, we'll be off to Singapore next, and then off to South Korea for APEC. And then we'll be having good conversations regarding CPTPP and the EU. How can we bring that trading bloc together to really talk about why rules-based trading matters? Because at a time of fractures, especially with the global trade headwinds, we need to show businesses that there is a level of stability, there is a level of certainty. And I think with the CPTPP trading bloc and with the EU, we can do a lot together, and that will be part of our conversations next month in Australia when we have our CPTPP dialogue.
Can you stay committed to a rules-based arrangement when the US is not really a part of it?
Absolutely. I will wholeheartedly say that we are committed to rules-based trading. That's what our businesses expect. But that's what makes Canada shine. It's our stability. It's our rules-based trading. It's why my phone has been ringing off the hook from companies, from countries that want to do more with Canada because of our stability. And we will continue making sure that the stability is there, working with our partners internationally, but also working within Canada. We're releasing our budget on November 4th. And so there'll be a lot of investment opportunities within our budget to attract investment, but also to support our working class Canadians in terms of opportunities, what we're going to bring into the country.
Minister, just to wrap up the conversation, as you speak to your counterparts around the world, what is the biggest challenge for trade ministers these days, given the current environment?
There are a lot of challenges for trade ministers. I would say making sure that there's stability for businesses, making sure that we're presenting a united front in terms of rules-based trading. There's been a lot of conversations around the WTO, as you know, for reforms. How do we make that system work? And so that's where it's very, very important, when you come back to it, is that stability that we can offer. And so when you talk about what we're having in terms of conversation with trading minister, it is presenting that stability, sitting down and presenting what does reforms look like? How do we make sure the system works for everybody? And so that will be part of the conversation next month in Australia with trade ministers when we meet, and a path forward of what more can we do for businesses.
Minister, thank you so much for your time. Been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Please welcome to the stage Shinta Wijaya Kamdani, CEO, Synthesa Group, and Sunny Verghese, Executive Director, Co-founder, and Group CEO, Olam, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Avril Hong.
Thank you to both our panelists for being here. Now, we are here to talk about ESG, but I think you cannot avoid talking about tariffs as well, that for some, including agri-traders, might be compounding the climate risk. And then you think about as well the uncertainty surrounding US policy, including on sustainability initiatives, the net zero transition, but we have some in Asia, including Synthesa Group, that are staying the course and remaining very committed. So let's first get the lay of the land. Sunny, let's start with you first. We just heard from the Canadian minister talking intensively about trade. How are tariffs, first off, affecting the business and impacting, perhaps compounding as well, some of the climate risks?
So tariffs in agriculture, and I'll speak in the context of agriculture, we know the wide-ranging impact of tariffs across all sectors and the economy overall. But agriculture is particularly sensitive because we already have fundamental challenges in supply and demand, and I'll go through that in a minute. But the standoff currently between China and the US on, let's take a case in point, soybeans is a good example. China is the world's largest consumer of soybeans because it's the fastest growing protein market, and therefore it buys about 110 million tons of soybean annually. A significant chunk of that was from the US. US accounted for 60% of China's soybean imports. But today, for the first 10 months of this year, China has not imported a single kilo from the US. And most of China's supply has been substituted, US supply to China has been substituted by Brazil. Brazil is now the fastest growing trade corridor. The soybean exports from Brazil to China is now the fastest growing trade corridor. And between Brazil and Argentina, which is also extremely close to the US, are meeting all of China's requirements. And that is why China has held on. We will see what happens in the next day or so in terms of what the final settlement would be. But that's an example. US is the world's largest exporter of cotton. China is also the world's largest importer of cotton. So that's another example where it's stuck. There is no exports at all. US, for example, in our business, is the world's largest producer of almonds. It's a very expensive place to grow anything. But because of certain agroclimatic conditions, 84% of the world's production of almonds comes in California because you have to cross-pollinate that. The bees like the agroclimatic conditions in California. The bees will only fly for a few hours in the day.
Right.
I can't give them overtime and get them to fly more. If the wind speeds are a certain 15 kilometers, more than 15 kilometers an hour, they will not fly.
Right.
So that's why California is a very big producer. China is a huge consumer of almonds. Where is that almonds going to be replaced from if there is a stalemate? So these are just very few top-of-the-mind examples of businesses that I'm involved in where I see the impact of tariffs.
That's very important context, right? Talk to us also, in the past day, we're hearing very positive setup in terms of the tone from the US Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. There are indications, or at least they're optimistic, that the Chinese will up their purchases of soybean. Maybe not this year because it's too late in the year, maybe next year.
Yeah.
How are you viewing that? Do you think that is realistic to expect? And to what extent might we actually see an increases from the Chinese side on soybean purchases?
So China has learned its lesson, and it will never be dependent on any one country, particularly for food. So we have fought wars over oil. Imagine what we will fight over food and water, which are the other major strategic challenges in food security. So we have firstly a food demand problem. we need to add another 7,500 trillion calories per day to meet the growing population. So there's a demand gap. We have a supply gap. We have 593 million hectares that we have to additionally put under cultivation to feed all the world, right? 593 million hectares, to get a sense of what it means, is twice that of India. So you need to add 2 Indias to bring it under arable cultivation to meet the demand from the supply side. The third is the GHG mitigation gap. If you want to get to 1.5 degrees centigrade, you need to reduce agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions to 0. And today we have got about 12 gigatons of contribution from agriculture emissions. It's going to go to 15 by 2050. That has to come down to 0. In order for it to come down to 0 to get to 1.5 degrees, we have to plant another 87 million hectares to really achieve that. Then we have a nature biodiversity collapse. The bees are a good example. I had to make a profit warning because in Australia we had a varroa mite infestation. It destroyed the bee population. Instead of having 5 beehives per acre stocking density, I could only afford 2 because there were no bees. My yields collapsed. I made a profit warning that we will lose $138 million. So these tiny fragile creatures, I buy 4.8 billion bees a year.
Right.
Spend about $13–14 million. So we know every tiny toad, tick, and creature, as far as biosphere integrity is concerned, is vital for agricultural production.
And how does that relate to China specifically when it comes to what it might be buying more or less of from the US, you think?
So China's looking at where climate change impacts are the most, where biodiversity impacts are the most,
right,
where the water challenges. 70% of the world's fresh water is in agriculture. There's no way we can increase land or increase water. So how do we meet the growing demand for calories with the growing population, change in dietary habits, when you have constraints in terms of resources? So for every unit of animal, every unit of land, every unit of fertilizer, every unit of drop of water, rainfall, you have to maximize productivity. So that is what all countries, in their self-enlightened interest, is looking for. How do we manage these supply chains and configure the supply chains that we are not dependent? Because it's not just the US tariffs. Indonesia bans the export of palm oil. India bans the export of rice. And I can go on. 117 new non-tariff trade barriers and tariff barriers has been imposed by many countries around the world.
Sunny,
we talk about the US.
We know you are obviously a massive player in cocoa, coffee trade. So I want to get your thoughts on that in just a bit. But Ibu Shinta, if we could just bring you in here, because I just talked about during our introduction and off stage as well, when it comes to ESG, it doesn't come naturally. Now we're seeing shifts in policies globally. How do you stay the course?
Well, first of all, when we look at Indonesia as a country, obviously, many companies, local companies, this is still a concept that we are still learning the cost, let's put it that way. We know the demand of market, the trend of the market is there, that all companies now are following the standards. But bear in mind, our local companies are not in a way connected and linked up directly on a global market. So what Syntesa is doing is basically something that we try to be ahead of most of majority of the local companies. When I started the effort of sustainable development, even in Indonesia, I think that was 2012. At that time, our president becomes one of the eminent person for SDG. You know, I never thought the journey will get me this far, you know, in which putting Indonesia in the map. And as a Syntesa group, actually, we are a family business of over 105 years. I'm a third generation. The last thing that I think the founder, my grandfather started a rubber plantation. My father started a trading business. In their mind, there's only profit, right? They don't look at a triple bottom line, you know, sustainability. What is this all, right? So I think the first foremost important is for me to really bring Syntesa into a space of this is going to be now our vision. We want to be a sustainable excellence company. We want to balance this profit, people, planet, and make this not as a jargon, but something to be implemented. And of course, now we have all the measurement that's needed. But again, we need a compass. So the first thing that I always believe is that when I'm convinced with something, I want to lead effort, and not just for my company, but also for Indonesia's private sector, I have to start with the people, right? So I think putting embedded ESG, at that time we're looking into SDG, into our business model, I think is not an easy journey.
To your point, though, about being perhaps ahead of your time, or our time, when it comes to ESG, starting way back when, how difficult was it to convince shareholders, in this case, your family?
Very tough. They think I'm like, continuing, sometimes I always said, maybe starting your own, like founding something, it's much easier because it's yours. When you continue family business, there's this legacy that needs to be continued. And for sure, you don't want to be the third generation who's going to break this family business, right? So in their mind, of course, the number one is the economic aspect, the profitability aspect. So convincing, I think, our shareholders that this is the way to go is not an easy game. And at the same time, I have to ensure that this is not going to impact our economic bottom line, right? In other words, we will continue growing despite all the initiative that we are trying to do on the SDG
So
side.
with that in mind, what are the projects that Syntesa are still focused on, whether you're looking in terms of the expansion when it comes to the energy transition, or projects that are related to infrastructure, specifically urban industrial usage?
Yes. So first, when we look at now the model of the SDG, we have embedded this on the investment side and the operational side. On the investment side, like I said, we are a four-pillar company with fast-moving consumer product, industrial product. We have a clean energy, and we have the property side, right? So we are now specifying specific SDG goal into our investment and operation. On the investment side, we have what we call the investment matrix that we follow. And for example, for specific on the real estate side, when we are doing the development, building, infrastructure, we have specific metrics on how to follow, going into the SDG that we want. So this is not just about wanting to do it, it's how do we actually measure it in order for us to get to the KPI of the ESG that we want.
Sunny, let's bring you in here because we know how that long-term plan in terms of restructuring, I guess, for Olam, part of it was to make the business more sustainable. How would you assess the progress you've had so far? What else are the gaps that need to be closed? And in what way is that helping to attract additional investors for Olam?
So some part of sustainability strategy for companies is very idiosyncratic and contextual to which sector and what kind of business model you have. Some parts of sustainability is generic, right? So on governance side, I don't think it is sector specific or idiosyncratic to any particular company. So for us, the only way sustainability can take hold and have deep roots in the company is if it is an integral part of your business model. And that you are actually able to demonstrate to your stakeholders that through these sustainability programs that you're running, you're actually able to do multiple things. One, increase your share of wallet with your customer. So second, improve your margins, reduce your costs. And we can give many examples of that. But if you are not able to demonstrate actually what is the impact, you will not get support, and it is not going to be sustainable to keep it going. So for example, there is a new EU law called EUDR, and about 9 supply chains are involved. So we are getting significant premiums. So typically a gross margin, say for FSC certified wood, will be about $70, $80 per cubic meter. But a EUDR certified, FSC certified wood product will give you an incremental $125 It's even given us an incremental $200 per ton. So it is almost 3 times your current inherent margins.
Right.
So there are so many programs that we run where we can demonstrate that this has given us an increasing pricing power, given us a higher share of the customer's wallet. It has reduced our costs, energy efficiencies, and everything else. Actually, you can demonstrate has reduced the cost. So if sustainability is an afterthought, if it's a risk mitigation strategy, it is not integral to your business model, there's no hope in hell that it's sustainable.
Okay, it has to be integrated within.
Integrated, and you have to demonstrate, because it has to be sustainable. It's only sustainable if it is going to have an impact for us.
You raise a good point. I mean, when it comes to premium, I wonder also, are you seeing this so-called greenium? And sometimes that's linked with ESG labeled debt. Are you seeing that fading? Is there any erosion of that? Is that what you are witnessing?
No, for initially when these initiatives are launched, it is very difficult to transition and be ready. So during that period, there is excess returns because a few companies are able to make that investment or use technology to help them comply. So Singapore is one of the few countries where there is a carbon tax. It was $5 in 2017. It has now gone up to $25. It is going to go to $45 next year, and it is going to go up to $80 by 2030. You have scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. 70% of Singapore companies' emissions are taken care of by the Singapore carbon tax. If carbon is free, we are going to pollute indiscriminately. If water is free in Singapore, or electricity is free, we are going to consume indiscriminately. Now carbon is priced. So for me as a company, my emissions in Singapore is low. But for one of my 3 companies, we have total emissions of 59 million tons a year, out of which 56 million tons is scope 1 and scope 3, and only 4 million tons is scope 1 and 2. But if I take my total emissions and I get a carbon tax, let's say on an average $50, then I have $250 million of carbon costs in the future. What is a bigger priority for me as a CEO or for my CFO, but to address this single largest item of cost, which is going to be a reality. 55 countries have now implemented some form of carbon tax. And that is therefore going to be real dollars that you're going to incur.
In terms of financing, does Olam or yourself, do you have a preference for, say, loans versus debt or bonds? Given how maybe bonds might have a bit more scrutiny now, does it make things a bit trickier when it comes to ESG?
The key is really how many bankable projects which you can demonstrate benefit, cost benefit, and that can be sustained over the tenure of the project. So we are agnostic to whether it should be a loan or whether it should be a trade finance facility. In 2024, we raised about $3.6 billion of sustainability-linked financing. And that is at real scale. That is across the globe.
And more to come?
67 countries.
And more to come in terms of the scale of raising. Is that what you're anticipating?
Yes,
as well?
and we expect we will get some advantage. But even on our scale, if we can get 10, 15 basis points advantage for sustainability-linked financing and loans, it can make a real impact to our bottom line.
Okay. Ibu Shinto, I see you nodding away. What is the perspective from Sintesa in terms of bankable projects and what you are looking very interested in?
I think, you know, when we look at the financing, I'm now co-chairing the UN investing in SDG, and we have all kind of financing instruments. Blended finance especially is something that we're currently doing. But so I think the financing, it's definitely out there. It's more of having the bankable projects. And I think this is, I mean, when we are in renewable energy, for sure, the financing is there, right? But again, it's more the cost of the financing. It's not the excess of financing. So the cost at the end of the day, you have to calculate that, right? Is there, cost also means incentive. Like, is it a lower interest rate when you do a renewable energy project compared to, you know, others? You know, it's I think, this is something that we need to pay attention, because at the end of the day, the number needs to work. But besides that, the incentive, how does this is why we always work out. Indonesia is right now, for example, going through energy transition. We have projects that are going into on the energy transition. Besides the financing, the regulatory framework is very important, right? We are a fossil fuel country in which we are now trying to drive the energy transition. Actually, we're working with Bloomberg, having just issued the fact book on green transition. So you look at all the opportunities, but why are the execution not as what we wanted, right? So the government needs to pay attention that the regulatory framework and the policies come out. We're talking about the tariff. We're talking about the incentive that is given needs to be there. And on top of that, I really believe this is to make projects bankable by itself. You need to really have the right environment. It's not just about the company getting ready for the project. The whole environment needs to be there in order for the financing to be in place. So we find that many of the projects that we do on the renewable, for example, I mean, I wanted to share this specific project because I'm so excited about doing our seaweed project. It's called the Seaweed Indonesia Incorporated. What do we do? It's the ecosystem that we build. Any company wants to set up, want to develop seaweed. I mean, we have many opportunities, but do we have the right ecosystem to make it work? So what we do is now we work together with our government, right, in developing seaweed potential research in different areas of Indonesia. We have certain pilot project, for example, in North Sulawesi that we are developing. We have an ecotourism project. On top of that, we are also wanting to develop seaweed there. And we need to work on really the government and types of the technology that we bring in on the research side, but also working on the financing side also with the buyers. Because at the end of the day, we also need to do from the development of the seaweed, where does Indonesia is going on downstreaming industry. Do we want to go in which downstreaming pillar that we go on?
I was just wondering, what role do you see then Syntesa play in this ecosystem? Are you perhaps considering coming in as concessional investor versus commercial investor? Are you considering concessional equity? What is the...
We are an ecosystem builder. At the end of the day, I find that companies, there's a lot of even startups out there are doing it, all working on a silo. I said, nobody will make it work. Nobody will be successful unless we build the ecosystem. And this is why we need all the partnership also. We are bringing, from different, not just local, but also technology that we bring from abroad. So what we want to play here is that we need to start from the whole ecosystem. It cannot be just, we want to invest in the plantation or, we want to, it's in the scenario of the model that needs to work. It's the first thing is we need to identify where does everybody sits in. And the opportunities are plenty. You have the money, you can put in. But one thing, Indonesia, I really believe seaweed, it will be our next CPO.
Okay, watch this space. Sunny, I wonder if you could weigh in on that when we're talking about soft commodities. I mean, part of the competitive advantage that you get in looking at things from a climate angle is to mitigate the risks. That's something that you alluded to earlier. How exactly is that shaping Olam's business? And where do you see coffee prices going against this backdrop?
Yeah, I have no predictions on the coffee prices or all the other commodities that we trade in. We have a point of view, but we do more than 50 commodities. Each one has a different cyclical and structural medium-term and long-term tenor in terms of what will happen to prices, and that's based on many factors. So I'm not going to spend time here talking about a specific view on coffee prices or cocoa prices. But I think there are 4 drivers which are really incentivizing companies now to take sustainability very seriously. One clear thing is that investors are really asking for it. In the past, we had some road shows for looking at raising capital from investors. And when I did these road shows, even 5 years ago, we did not have anybody really focus on sustainability. And today, I don't think there was any investor who didn't want to know about our sustainability strategy and how it's going to impact us. So investors want it, customers want it, and they're willing to pay for it. And we've got many examples of where we're getting pricing power and premium from the customers. Third, we are not able to attract good quality talent that wants to stay with us unless they find some meaning and purpose in the work that they do. So they come to work and say that we're selling more cocoa or more coffee, doesn't excite them. But if they come and say that we are trying to change the company, change the sector, change the world, and we have a role to play, and what I'm doing every day helps in that process, it provides them meaning and purpose, and you're able to get a different level of inspired employees who really want to come to work. They're not saying, waking up in the morning and saying, another day at work. They're waking up in the morning and saying, I want to go to work because I'm making some impact and difference. So I think all of this and the regulatory part, all of these 4 things coming together is now pushing more and more companies to become sustainable. But the hard part is how to make it integral to your business model. If it is a risk management afterthought, it's not going to work. So I think that is the key. And for me, the most important thing is how do we really bring change to happen? We've had 3 miraculous agreements that the governments have come together and signed up. Paris Accord was signed up by 194 countries to limit global warming to under 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degrees. Imagine 2 countries agreeing on anything, 194 countries coming together and agreeing on that. And then we had the UN SDGs in 2015, again 195 countries, 17 granular targets, goals, and 167 targets. These countries are saying this is the future that we want to leave for our children. This is the world that we want to live in, right? And then there was the Convention on Biodiversity, agreeing on certain strategic goals and very specific 20 goals. But we have not achieved anything in all of this, in all of these 3 major miraculous agreements. And the first thing is because there is no individual change. There are 8.3 billion people in the world. If I ask the audience here, how many of you know your carbon footprint, your water footprint, your waste footprint? If we do not know what our footprint is, how can we preach that we will deal with these existential challenges that confronts us?
Right. It starts with knowing the metrics, the data.
Individually, not just the
on
company
the individual level.
Then the company has to know it. Then you have to be part of a sectoral coalition. The food and agri sector comes together and say, how can we build a sustainable food future? Then the governments have to come to the party. They have to have the taxes. They have to make disclosure. So Singapore Stock Exchange is now saying that the Singapore Straits Times index stocks will have to next year compulsorily report, mandatorily report. So they have to come to the party. Innovation has to be funded, and we need at least $4.5 trillion a year in research in just agriculture, not the whole thing, just agriculture. Unless all this comes together, we are not going to change. 10 years ago, God forbid, but if you invite me for another Bloomberg conference and I'm speaking, we will be still beating our chests and lamenting, what the hell did we do? Why didn't we act?
Yeah, that's I think part of, I guess, holding individuals accountable in a way. But Sunny, we are also in an environment where weather patterns are more extreme.
Yes.
I know you've been heavily involved, and your business has been heavily involved in coming up with perhaps innovative solutions. How has that actually brought cost benefits? Can you put some numbers to what you're seeing in the business?
So I told you about carbon and climate change. The task for us is how do we reduce our carbon costs? And our carbon cost is equivalent to almost 50% of our after-tax earnings. So it's a huge priority for us, as an example. But in order to minimize your carbon emissions, the first thing you have to do is measure it. How do we make sure we have 1,800 supply chains in the company? Every supply chain, if I do a life cycle bottom-up analysis of what my scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are, it will take me 9 months. For each supply chain, it will cost me about 20,000 pounds sterling. So just imagine how costly, how time-consuming it's going to be. So we have a tool called Terrascope, which helps us using AI to measure scope 1, 2, 3 emissions quicker, cheaper, more accurately. Now, more than 50 odd companies are using that system today
to measure. If you don't measure, you can't manage. So that is an example of an innovation that helps you actually put your money where your mouth is and actually deliver some tangible change.
Ibu Shinta, we're running out of time, but if you could just very quickly weigh in on whether some of these extreme weather events are making it a bit more difficult as you ascertain what sort of projects you're going to put money towards.
Obviously, the whole climate change condition, it's not helping us, right? But I wanted to close with this. I think we have to commit ourselves to what I believe in. In other words, this is something that we start from the top, going to the bottom. When we look at ESG, it's not just about the index of ESG that we're trying to measure, but it's also in how our people are actually understanding and walking through the projects on the measurement side. So what I'm saying now is when we look at, we have now the roadmap of Synthesa for the Earth. We have specific goals on our SDG. Our KPI is not just about performance or financial performance. Our KPI is also how we are able to measure the achievement of our SDG goal. And this is the KPI of our people. You know, I wanted to close with the people because at the end of the day, you know, companies has different level of resources, you know. Every company, you know, at the end of the goal, okay, they will produce a sustainability report.
Right.
But this is something that our people need to understand when they work on it, you know, how are they being part of that contribution on producing such a result. So the KPI of the people, I think is important that that's also integrated into how they are measured in achieving that. And we have a whole lot of each of the project owners have the sustainability committee side that has really driving this through. But it's top to bottom. This is not just about founders committed on wanting to do it, but I think the people have to believe in it, that the company driving this way, this is the future, despite all the challenges that we're facing, climate change, financing, whatever. At the end of the day, this is the belief that we want, and this will make us successful.
And so, to Sunny's point, maybe this will also ensure that 10 years from now, we're not coming and circling back to the same bits of the conversations and the issues, moving the conversation forward. Sunny, Ibu Shinta, great to have you both. Thank you so much for your time today. And we've been talking so much about food and soft commodities. It's actually time for lunch. So I invite you to enjoy some of the refreshments outside. We'll be back at 3 p.m. Thanks again, everyone.